I've been thinking over the last 4 years, and particularly over this last year, what are the fundamental underlying ideas from Lean that actually are of value in thinking through what does Lean mean for the digital age. So I'm going back to the deep Lean ideas and trying to summarize a few key ideas that hopefully can help us shape what the digital world could become. So that's my starting point today. I think the first real transition that's happened in the Lean movement is that we've focused a lot on the tools, and we've focused a lot on systems and trying to understand the management system. All of that's extremely important. But over the last few years, I think we've been also realizing that much more fundamental to the management system and the tools is actually two fundamental underlying principles. And the first principle that really sets Lean off from other movements is that it's about engaging everyone, literally everyone in the organization, to do things that they currently cannot do. Improve what they do today and do new things, but do things that they currently cannot do. So the first principle is it's all about engaging everyone rather than engaging experts to design and think for us, which is the classic Taylorist view of management. The second thing is, as you discover, when you go through a few problem-solving exercises, the sensei actually seems to be completely uninterested in the solution that you've come up with. He goes, so what? And you've struggled, and you're proud of what you've learned, and you're proud of the achievements that you've achieved and the business results that you may have improved, until you realize that actually the point of Lean is engaging everyone in learning. And we learn through repeated practice. So that's the other fundamental pillar of Lean, if you like, is that it's not the solutions we come up with. They're important, of course, but they're actually a means to a much deeper end, which is deepening our ability to understand our environment more intelligently, to really see what's going on an evidence base, and therefore develop better solutions as a result of that. So that's really the movement, the transition, the opening that I think we've been going through over the last couple of years. And I think Michael Ballet's work on Lead with Respect, which I'll come back to in this talk, has played a major role in that. So it's about engaging everyone, not just a few, and it's about learning as the purpose of Lean. And we learn by repeated practice. And so the more times we go through the process of solving and identifying and solving a problem, the more we deepen our experience and our ability to do things not only that we couldn't do today, but we can't even imagine today. So repeated practice means that actually the goal of engaging everybody in Kaizen every day actually really makes much, much deeper sense than maybe it does at first sight. So that's, I think, the first transition. We're understanding Lean now as a path of learning through practice. And that's actually quite profound. And I think as you play with these Lean ideas, and I know many of you have been cherry-picking pieces of the Lean story, as you engage with those, you realize, in fact, they're part of a bigger story and part of a much more deeply connected set of ideas. And that's what I'm trying to illustrate here. And this is probably the most profound of all of them. So that's the first point I wanted to make, and it's been picked up by a Nobel Prize-winning economist, Joe Stiglitz, in this book, Creating a Learning Society, where he recognizes that learning is at the core of improving living standards, dealing with the environment, and all of those problems that we face. We're talking about dynamic economies. We're not talking about optimizing existing assets. And that's really quite profound. That is actually entering the discussion now on competitiveness and about the focus our society should place on learning not as a classroom activity, but learning through doing, through engaging with the real world and diagnosing and using the scientific method to improve that real world. So that's really the first point I wanted to make. The second point I wanted to make is that as we have been cherry picking and been looking at the work of developing software and IT, just like any other knowledge work, like any other work, in fact, I think the distinction between physical and knowledge work is actually increasingly blurred. But as we've been doing that, we've been understanding the power of compressing time. We've been understanding the power of breaking things down into bite-sized chunks, creating a rhythm, a cadence, a scrum, of being able to better predict and understand the causes of the work that we receive and begin to better predict the number of work cycles is going to be necessary to achieve it, and therefore we're better able to align capacity with demand. And of course, this has been picked up, I think, big time in the digital world, both in terms of the startup movement, but also in terms of redesigning software. The idea that we're in a world where we want to break things down into daily releases and get immediate feedback from the audience and gradually, incrementally, improve our systems. I think that's a common experience. We've all experienced that in from slightly different ways, but in fact, it's an interlocking set of ideas. But the underlying idea that arises from that, that's hard to grasp at first, but I think is really profound, and it took me a long time to be fully convinced of this, is that actually accelerated incremental learning actually beats big projects. Daily Kaizen leads to more dynamic economies than the attempt to make big leaps for big projects. I'm not saying we don't ever make big leaps, we don't ever do big projects, but the world is increasingly looking like a delivery system or delivering new products, new knowledge, and so on. And the core of the continuous improvement of our product and service and knowledge and the delivering system is the capability of the people in that process and the cumulative experience of those people of going through repeated PDCA cycles every day. So it isn't just the breaking the work down into smaller increments and the feedback from the marketplace. It's actually, this is a way of deepening and accelerating the learning of that system. So it's not the technical aspects, but it's actually the human aspects, the human learning aspects that are key to whether this accelerated incremental learning actually really can beat big projects. Because it's about accelerated learning and getting feedback from the marketplace, but it's also incorporating an understanding of the social acceptance of both the work, but also of the innovation being offered to the customer. So again, we're coming back to understanding our delivery streams, I would call them now. Our delivery streams as a set of capabilities and as a set of shared and individual learning that accumulates into the capabilities of that system. So increasingly, we're moving away from the world of projects. I actually, whenever I meet the lean product development crowd, I always am amazed at how they love to talk about the details of project management and all the arcane details of set-based engineering and simultaneous engineering, all of those kind of things. And I think, why don't we just focus on compressing time? That's going to force us to redesign this system and to focus on accelerating the pieces of the system that constrain us from moving to a system of incremental improvement every day. So again, I'm not saying we don't have projects, but I think the world increasingly doesn't look like the project management world. That's a smaller and smaller piece of our experience of work. So that's the second point I wanted to make. The third point I wanted to make is really not so much for just the front line themselves, but actually the management, the leaders of that front line, the direct management. Because we talk about learning and practice and building not just individual competence, that's the world of the craftsman, that we want to preserve, and we have an image that gives us the freedom to be creative. But the organizational knowledge of experience, cumulative experience, and the capturing the learning from that, that actually enables us to create stronger hypotheses for the next iteration of problem solving. So we learn faster together than we do alone. And I think a lot of the interesting experiments I'm seeing in the software development world of designing two people on a screen, of daily sharing of experiences, building common languages and deepening skills rather than deep portfolios of knowledge in key people. All of those, I think, are illuminations of that issue. However, we focus a lot on problem solving. And in a sense, the problem solving is the easy part. That's the routine aspect that we can go through on a daily basis. Much more important is the task for those people giving the problems. And Sensei will actually guide the activities of the Deshi through giving the right problem, through finding and framing the right problem. So we've spent a lot of time thinking about problem solving. We spent less time in problem framing and far less time in problem finding. And the truth is, in most complex, particularly invisible systems like software development, as opposed to a physical environment like a factory where you can see what's going on, that becomes more important because we cannot actually really see the real problems until we watch our subordinates tackling with the detailed problems and learning through their learning. So, if you like, this is the task of the front line, this is the task of the immediate supervisors, but this is the task of managers, of finding and understanding what are the major problems and major capabilities we need to build to solve tomorrow's problems. And we do that through asking questions rather than telling people what to do. The go see. By enabling and mentoring. And again, there's been a tremendous rise of interest in how we ask the right questions and how we mentor and enable and unblock and enable the front line to improve their work. And as we do that, we begin to see how we can challenge the front line and how we treat them with respect, real respect, i.e. challenge and develop their full capabilities. And if you haven't read Michael's book, you absolutely should read Michael's book because it tells the story, and that's why the novel in this case is a particularly powerful vehicle. It tells the personal journey that goes on of developing, if you like, the problem finding on the one sense capability and the leading the problem solving activity on the other. So interesting, we actually learn in this environment. We learn by helping others learn. And I think that's very interesting. If you just think about it for the moment, most management systems, management cannot actually see the process because it's so chaotic and so difficult to understand. You can understand it in concept, but really down in the details, the system itself really only becomes visible once we start tackling the issues in the process itself. Once that happens, you begin to see the implications elsewhere, you begin to see the business results, that could be achieved by solving that problem, etc., etc. So management really isn't just about Gemba walking. Management's also about helping observe and understand at a much deeper level the problems with your delivery streams and the problems in developing the right capabilities in the right place to do that. Again, it comes back to learning. And the next, so maybe sensei isn't the right word. Maybe we're not all going to become senseis. But the idea of moving away from individual craft skills to knowledge workers, to something else, to process masters, to experts. I don't quite know what the word is, and I'll use sensei for the moment in the sense of the ability to coach and teach and mentor and frame questions and find questions. So I had a question mark over whether sensei is the right word. I don't think we have the right word to describe that. So the next issue, of course, is one of the hardest ones to grapple with, is to really understand the mindset change that's necessary to think back from the user, not to think forward to the user, which is how we usually think, but think back from the user. And this is tied up with the notion of experts. I said right at the beginning, the lean approach, in contrast to a Taylorist vision, is about engaging everyone, not just experts. And what Diderot did for the craftsman, Google has done for the knowledge workers. We all have access to all of that knowledge, that technical knowledge, on the web. So we're all experts now, including your customers often. What does an expert mean in this world? Being able, I think it's going back to being able to frame the right questions, being able to mobilize the right issues and tools to solve the right questions. So we're all going to be deeply offended by the fact that actually it's a legacy mindset to believe that we know best. Because we don't. Now, let me tell you a little story just to illustrate this. One of the interesting examples I visited last year was a healthcare system in Saskatchewan in Canada, where they were not only doing lots of lean all over the healthcare system, they were actually using the 3P exercise to redesign the next generation hospital. They had to replace the hospital building. So they took a big warehouse, and the frontline staff and doctors had been streamlining their processes and doing a tremendous amount of problem solving, and were really be able to see their processes. They were able to be process masters, if you like, to a certain degree at least. So they really understood their processes rather than, in the past, they'd simply understood a set of activities that were disconnected. So they understood the processes. And they brought a bunch of frontline staff plus a bunch of patients who were able to articulate the experience of coming into such a system and feeling, and the experience of going through a healthcare system. And they brought them in a room, and in a structured way, they got them to mock up all of the process flows in the hospital and design what an ideal layout might be, and that's what you got on the right-hand side. And they also mocked up the rooms, the standard room sizes, and to decide exactly what everything should go where. And the interesting thing is, the architects and the builders were not allowed to intervene in this process. They were allowed to observe it from outside, but not intervene. Until they'd done this 3 times, and they got very similar answers, until the process needs and the needs of the patients were very clear. Then they were able to design a building that was buildable in a fraction of the time and had a 40% reduction in running costs over the life of the hospital. So interesting, question of how do we capture that learning? And I think our initial instinct would be, well, the architects would capture it, or we would simulate the flows and we'd create a simulation model of the hospital. As experts, we would determine what the next hospital design should look like. Totally misses the point. You're designing a system for a set of capabilities that doesn't exist. We design the capabilities here in process, and least understanding the processes, that then could utilize the design. So I think it is imperative that we develop knowledgeable users and see them as partners rather than as recipients that we test things out on, new things out on. And the final conclusion here, of course, is, well, what do you automate in such a system? Where do you have stable enough processes to be able to create algorithms that actually might work? And the usual Toyota answer, of course, is you master the process first and you automate last. And usually we try, for compliance reasons, to do exactly the opposite. And in Toyota's case, we also think, Toyota also thinks, about how can we, if we do automate something, how do we make deviations from the norm visible? Just going right back to the standard, the Jidoka principle. My final slide, final but one slide, is that Lean also completely brings a very different image of an organization. Reading the Second Machine Age book, I was struck by suddenly, there's a phrase in there talking about the CEO setting the objectives, deciding the strategy, and it being implemented, which told me that these people, technically competent though they might be, have absolutely no idea of management. And that's what Lean gives. Lean gives us a vision of a management system focused on enabling the front line. It's a management system built to enable the front line to do value-creating work, focused around the value streams that we've talked about with clear direction and purpose. So Lean brings a very different image of the organization that we want to create in the future. And the test, of course, is are we helping users to solve their problems? Or are we simply trying to create a technical monopoly that gives us the ability to control customers and to grow very large? I'm not saying one is incompatible with the other, but we've got to be very clear. So the final slide, oh, wait a minute. This is a question to you, I don't know the answer, is what are the communications to support it that we need to support a lean enterprise? I don't think they're the traditional command, control, and compliance. Big system design from the top. That simply, to me, looks like an anachronism. The web, to me, looks like a much more viable image of the future of systems, and you need to tell me who owns the data. So I'll leave all of those questions with you, but those, I think, follow from the image of the organization. Well, what is the communication needs to enable that organization to live? And I'll leave you with this. It's Toyota's vision statement. If you haven't looked at this, I think you really should. Notice that the Toyota way and competence and learning and so on is the tree, is the foundation of the roots for the tree for Toyota to say they're going to lead the way for future mobility. And they're going to develop the systems that are necessary, respecting the environment, through commitment to quality, respect for the planet, and respect for people, and expect to exceed expectations and be rewarded with a smile. And we'll meet our challenging goals by encouraging the talent and passion of people who believe there is always a better way. I think that is an extremely good encapsulation of the kind of vision of an organization that is so rarely present in most organizations. Toyota have a very long history of designing extraordinarily powerful and very credible vision statements. going right back to the early 90s when they've had vision of the alternative energy sources. And most people laugh at them or don't take them seriously or think they're just wallpaper like most vision statements are. Toyota actually means it. And that's what I really think differentiates an organization that is dedicated to developing people before serving customers and the environment. So those are the things that I wanted to give you to think about, that Lean is actually to be seen, I think, as the contribution to understanding the social needs of the customer environment and the social needs of the organizations we need to create in the future, that needs to live with the technical vision, of course, of the possibilities of the digital age. So that's, in my view, what Lean's all about. Thank you very much.